Well, I don't know. After all of that, they may not want to be near each other at this point. Like, it's been a long. Okay. Yes. Good evening. Good evening. Hold on. Good evening. I'm just knocking stuff over. Can you hear me? There we are. Good evening. Good evening. I can get one of my little 4-year-old buddies to be saying, "Good morning, church," like they usually. Good evening, good evening. Welcome, beloved, to Grace United Methodist Church. I'm Pastor Katie. I'm the pastor here at Grace. Just a couple of quick housekeeping things. If the Spirit so moves you to the point you need a bathroom, go out that door, and as soon as you turn left, take it, and when you run out of place to walk, you'll hit the bathroom door. Or if there's any kind of emergency, that row right there is filled with Eden interns. Wave your hands. They're eager to take care of you in any way, shape, or form. Because that's what happens if you're an intern and you hang out here. Eden student. Technically only one of you is my intern now. So with that, our format for tonight is we are going to sing, we're going to listen, we're going to ask questions, we're going to pray, and then we're going to sing again. Because it's the most Methodist way to do anything. Right? So we're going to kind of get settled. I'm going to invite you as good Methodist. Get your nice big hymnal. We're going to do number 553, and Are We Yet Alive? Because I really like this one, and that's the joy of being in charge. So, I know you all feel weird sitting and sing. You may sit or stand, however the Spirit moves you for this. And Sarah, when you are ready, we are ready. Number 553, Andy says we need to stand. You may be seated. I'll be honest, it feels weird. I'm not introducing the offering right now, but at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Reverend Andy Bryan, and you will see me again when it is time for questions, but off I go.
Thank you, Katie. Appreciate that. Thank you, Roderick, for being here for sound, and Sarah for accompanying us this evening. I'll tell you, that third verse hits a little different. What fightings have we seen? What mighty conflicts past? Fightings without and fears within since we assembled last. It's a little different after this year's General Conference, and I think as we talk about what happened, that will become clear as to why that is. My name is Andy Bryan. Starting July 1st, I'll be pastor of Maplewood United Methodist Church, and I had the privilege of being on this delegation. I had the role of head of this delegation, but it was a collaborative effort with shared leadership, and 6 of us are here today. They're from Missouri. There are a total of 16 delegates and alternate delegates, reserve delegates who were present, 12 delegates and 4 reserve delegates from Missouri, and they did wonderfully well. And we are here to talk about what happened. So I'm going to have each of these folks briefly just introduce themselves and give just a brief. I'm looking at you, Ivan. Brief. Thought about the overall experience, just a general impression of our 2 weeks in Charlotte. Starting with Randy.
Oh, God. Amen. Well, if I can get through this without crying, it's been a very emotional General Conference. The high point was when my grandson sent me a text and thanked me for getting rid of the language so that they could be part of the church and could be accepted by the church. And I showed that to everybody. Everybody else cried too, but I'm the only one crying now. Where are you guys? But it was very powerful. This is my number 6 General Conference, and that's why I look like I do. But it's quite an experience. The first time I went to one, it was nothing like the local church. It was so far away from what we do trying to find disciples for Jesus Christ. And I'll tell you right at the beginning, I was not a progressive when I went to my first General Conference. I'd had a bad experience as a child, and it carried on. Each General Conference, and I'll throw my wife in here too, she's back there, we slowly moved to the left. Now, I'm a centrist, I'll say that, but I'm about 8 steps to the left, where I was only 1 step to the left or right to begin with. What I saw other people doing that said they were Christians at General Conference just ripped my heart out. And I couldn't take what they were doing to other people because they had the majority. And when they have the majority, they take over. I walked into this General Conference, and I've never felt so uplifted. We hadn't even done anything. But just the feeling and the people and everybody that was there to do work to help make us more inclusive. And I was an outsider. I sat in the reserves. I think I was the only reserve delegate from any of the things that stayed there the whole time. Maybe because I slept a lot, that helped me. But it was very, very, very powerful. Very, very powerful.
My name is John Copeland. I'm a lay delegate from Missouri. Do I need to? I feel like I always need to say my the other stuff too. But, yeah. This was my first time at General Conference. It was just really an incredible experience getting to work with these folks. This was, like Andy said, it was extremely collaborative. I think because the Missouri delegation worked together, we were able to affect some change in a positive way at General Conference, and getting to see how that plays out, what that means. I getting to see what the actual work in your committee looks like. It was really cool, but it was a lot of work, It was back-to-back 14-hour days for 2 weeks with Sunday off. And,
you had to cook.
and then I cooked on Sunday night. You get to hear a bishop preach every morning for 14 days, which is pretty cool, I think.
Hello, everyone. I'm Colette Cummings. I attend Maplewood United Methodist Church, and I was also a delegate. And I'm just going to say it was historic, and it was a lot of work, like both. And so I can't remember what my favorite thing was. Maybe it was being John sous chef on Sunday. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. Turn it? Okay, I can eat the mic. Okay. So I think one of my favorite things was being John sous chef. And it was also, I have two favorite things. Three, John sous chef, hanging out with the Mozambique delegation, and listening to Love Train in the middle of a general conference and everybody doing the Love Train. That was amazing. You had to be there.
All right, I'm Jill Wandell, also a lay delegate. When you're there, you get to introduce yourself. So you have to say, anytime you stand up, you have to say your name, where you're from, whether you're laity or clergy. And this time we also listed some demographic information so they could kind of monitor, who was at the mic. So, yeah. I think my favorite thing about meetings like General Conference is the opportunity you have to be in community with people from all around the world who hold kind of this similar way of doing Christianity. And that was really powerful. A lot of the votes, people that maybe didn't quite understand or didn't come from the same culture that we do, whatever, they voted on our behalf. And I think that's really powerful and a gift from them. So.
Good evening. That's all right. Okay. Good evening, everyone. I'm Ivan James. I serve as a lay pastor, not clergy, but I have the uniqueness of being in the clergy, but also a lay person. And at the general conference, I was classified as a laity. My church is at New Horizons United Methodist Church, which is about a little ways away from here, Central West End. This was my fourth annual general conference to be elected in. The first one was in 1916, and if I'm not mistaken, I was a reserve delegate. And then the next one was in Portland, and then the fatal one in St. Louis here, and then this one. I think the bishop who started off set the tone for the whole day, and he indicated that we were looking for a better conference, so to speak, and we were blessed to have those who were there, for the most part, were there because they wanted to be there. And that as we went through the week, we found that most of the resolutions and petitions and stuff were voted on. And for the most part, it indicated that everyone was looking for a change, setting a new footprint, if you will, for the United Methodist Church. And as you will hear tonight, and as you need to continue to read, you will find that that in fact did happen. And there is a new footprint, and that this could be and will be a different church, but it also will be a special church. And these folks here, it was just an honor to serve with them. We had good days and bad days, but every day was a blessed day, and for that we are thankful. I think it was the best, if there's such thing as a good general conference. This was the best one that I have attended. But as the bishop, president of the council of bishops said, now it's up to us. We have done all the talking. Now we got to walk the walk. because we're done the talk. I'm going to stop right now. I ain't going to say nothing else, man. I see. Don't be giving me the eyeball, okay? Yeah, I see. Andy and I have a good love-hate relationship, as you can see. But yeah, I'm just blessed, and I sit close to her. All these people are special, and you learn a lot about them. And on the other hand, they learn a lot about me too. So God bless them.
So there's a lot of things to talk about, and a lot of questions probably, just to make sure we're all on the same page about some things. The General Conference is the legislative body of our denomination. And so what the General Conference does is write 2 books. The one book is called the Book of Discipline, and that's the book that has all of our rules and policies. This is the book that is binding on local congregations. If it's in here, you're supposed to have to do it. So this is the rules. The rule book is the Book of Discipline. We also have this book, which is the Book of Resolutions. So this is a different term. If you hear about a resolution that got passed, it goes into this book, and it is a position on a social issue, and it is not binding. It is not a binding document. So you don't have to believe all of the positions that are in here in order to be a United Methodist. The General Conference got petitions for both of these books. And if you want to look at, so we get all those petitions ahead of time in volumes that are this thick. And this is how it gets processed. So if you actually want to look at that afterwards, all of the information daily, these documents are published, and then they're translated, written. Do we translate into 4 for written languages? We deal with over 10 languages in translation, but 4 written ones, I believe. So every day, all the business of the conference had to be translated and then printed so that we could deal with it the next day. And then we got to do this in 2 waves. And so there was a wave of over 700 petitions that came to the General Conference prior to 2020. And then there was a second wave that came coming into 2024. So at the end of all of that, we dealt with over 1,000 individual petitions. Every single individual member of every single United Methodist Church in the world has the authority to write a petition to General Conference. You don't even have to get your Sunday school class to agree with you. You can just write one. And some people do. There is an individual who was responsible for fully 5% of the petitions that we got this time around. One person. Nevertheless, you have probably heard about big ideas coming out of General Conference, right? So you've heard about removal of harmful language. You've heard about perhaps regionalization. You've probably heard about even maybe revised social principles. But you hear about sort of big ideas that come out of General Conference. Let me tell you, by our rules, you can't talk about a big idea all at once, because every big idea might impact multiple paragraphs of this book. And so it has to be dealt with by the group that's looking at the things that impact that particular paragraph. There are 14 such groups, legislative committees, and they all look at different sections of that book. So if there's a big idea like removal of harmful language, that may involve a dozen petitions that are looked at by 3 or 4 different legislative committees and then come to the main body after they go through the committee later on. So it's not a simple process, to say the least. So what we can say about these big ideas, though, this time, and I think some of these folks who have been to multiple general conferences were kind of hinting at this, it was a lot easier, nicer to get the big ideas out there than it had been in the past. There's a legislative process called a consent calendar. So if a petition comes out of committee with overwhelming support, it goes on a consent calendar. And there might be 25 items on a day's consent calendar. Well, among the items that was on one of the day's consent calendar was a couple of petitions that removed some harmful language to the LGBT plus community in a couple of different places. And it just sort of passed the consent calendar. And I don't know about you guys, but after that happened, I kind of had to go look and see what we had done. It was almost like anticlimactic. Like, it had happened so overwhelmingly out of committee, and then no one had wanted to take it off of the consent calendar. If you get 20 of your friends to sign a form, you can take an item off of a consent calendar and debate it on the floor. No one even got 20 people to want to take these things off the consent calendar. And so many of the petitions passed by consent calendar this year that wouldn't have passed in years before. Let's talk about some specific things. So the first one I would like to talk about is regionalization. Jill, would you like to speak into this particular idea? Jill Wandel is not only on the delegation, she's also a member of what we call the Standing Committee on Central Conference Matters. So she's been working on this with that committee. So just give some thoughts about what that looks like.
Just want a general. Yeah. I don't know where to start. It's complicated.
First, tell what the standing committee.
Yeah, so the Standing Committee on Central Conference Matters is also a legislative committee, but we meet throughout the 4 years of the quadrennium. So most of the committees only meet at General Conference, but the Standing Committee meets throughout the time between General Conferences. And our work is meant to be anything that concerns central conferences. So in the United States, we have jurisdictional conferences, and then everywhere else, there's central conferences. And so the Standing Committee deals with things that have to do with central conferences. So, yes, if they're made up of annual conferences, other places in the world. So, like there's like in the Philippines, there's several annual conferences in the Philippines, but then altogether it would be a Philippine Central Conference. There's several in Africa. There's 2, 3 maybe in Europe. Yeah. So it's dealing with all the non-U.S. things that we do over the years. So one of the things we worked on rather recently was this idea of regionalization. The idea is that originally, historically, the United Methodist Church started in the United States and began sending people out to other parts of the world, like as mission outposts. And so as you looked at the Book of Discipline, it's very U.S.-centric because that's how it started. And we're looking around at our current reality and saying maybe it's time for us not to be quite so U.S.-centric. Maybe we should make things a little more even. There's a lot of things we talk about at General Conference, like pensions, that only apply to people in the United States. And our friends from Africa and the Philippines and Europe have to sit through hours of conversation about our pension. And obviously that's not real fun for them. And they would prefer not to have to do that because that's something they deal with at their central conference meeting. And so the work of regionalization was really to kind of help even things out, make it more equitable, more fair. Just to make it less U.S.-centric.
And so that's not like a super like, ooh, that's awesome. I mean, that's, it doesn't have as much appeal as some of the others, but it's really, really important because it gives more autonomy to different contexts of ministry to establish what ministry looks like in those various contexts. And regionalization was an effort of the global church. It's been, people from all over the world worked on it, and so at this General Conference, it passed very easily. So we will have a U.S. regional conference that is for us, and then all the other conferences that are now called central conferences will be called regional conferences. They'll still have their structure, but they will be regional conferences and have a lot more autonomy to do ministry in ways that make sense there. Yeah. What will be the frequency of a U.S. regional conference meeting?
Oh, he
Gotcha.
answered it.
So it'll be every 4 years. And the thought is that at General Conference, we won't have as much to do, so it won't be as big of an affair. General Conference will be able to be more focused and then allow for the regional conference to meet thereafter for us, for U.S.
Pastor Ivan has a word for us.
Remind us on this, even though it passed with a whole lot of votes, I can't say that word. And not, what is it?
Unanimous.
It is a whole lot of them. Everybody voted for it. It still has to be ratified by each individual local annual conference. So even though it says we've done it, we'll have a chance in Missouri to have our say on that, which should be, I would think, to be in favor of it because it's better for the whole church. But we don't want to go out of here thinking that it's a done deal when, in fact, it has to be ratified by two-thirds of votes of the annual conference, and so that's very important.
And I know one of the questions that came in earlier is, can you clarify which things go into effect immediately, which things go into effect with this voting,
Yeah.
what's the timeline?
With this big idea, it's going to be a while before it goes into effect because we have to have all of the annual conferences have to meet between now and whenever they've all met. Like, for example, Missouri will not be voting on these constitutional amendments this year. There's simply not time to prepare between the end of General Conference and the beginning of our annual conference. And so our annual conference, as many, won't vote on it until even next year. Most of the legislation that gets passed at General Conference in general, just speaking in general, goes into effect on January 1st of the year following, unless it says in the petition itself, this is to go into effect immediately upon adjournment of this General Conference. So you're going to ask me which petitions said that and which didn't. And I will be honest with you, I've only been home for 2 days. I don't know for sure which do that. I do know that some of the petitions around inclusion included the line, go into effect immediately. I do not think all of them said that, and I just don't have it in my head clear enough to know which ones did. So, regionalization. The next big idea is the removal of restrictive language.
I have a question.
Yep.
I have a question about, could you clarify, you talked about the Book of Discipline. Can you clarify how the different regions relate to that Book of Discipline? Thank you.
So, right now, central conferences have the authority to amend sections of the Book of Discipline in a way that's contextual for their place. So that's true right now. Am I saying something that's right? Okay. However, the United States did not have that authority. And so there will be a general Book of Discipline that applies all around the world, and then each region will have its own Book of Discipline that has its own set of rules for ministry. Thank you.
Part of that is because some of the things that we have passed, if you will, some of the countries have laws that will prevent some of that.
That's right.
And so we are not trying to dictate that any longer and not beat up on people. But we can't answer that question because until we can sort out all the different things, we can't answer when they go into effect and what those disciplines will look like.
So in many different places, there were many different phrases that restricted participation in the church. So after this year, a pastor will not be breaking the rules if they conduct a same-sex wedding.
Woohoo! Sorry, had commentary there.
After this year, a pastor who is gay will not be breaking the rules by being ordained.
There's another woohoo.
No longer a chargeable offense listed in our book of discipline, and like I said, there's so many places where that is mentioned in the discipline that just involves so many different individual petitions. But the big idea is that even the petitions that did not appear on the consent calendar, and that's why I wanted you to know what consent calendar was. Even the ones that came off of consent calendar and were debated on the floor passed very, very comfortably. I also want you to hear this. Doing the math, and okay, first of all, I needed to say this. I should have said this earlier. A number of our non-U.S. delegates did not make it to Charlotte because of travel things, miscommunications, visas getting mixed up. A lot of our international delegates from Central Conference, didn't make it to Charlotte. If you took all the delegates who didn't make it and added 100% of them to the no votes, restrictive language would have still been taken out of the Book of Discipline. The math doesn't work out for people to say it's because not everybody was there. That's just not accurate. You hear me? So if every single one of them had voted no, which wouldn't have happened, but even if it had, it still would have passed, so that the restrictive language still would have been taken out. So this is a new part of the new day in the United Methodist Church, this sort of more open and inclusive version of United Methodism. So it involves compromise, and there was a compromise that happened on the floor. And it's around the new social principle about what marriage is. And it was offered as an amendment to what was in the social principle, which called marriage a relationship between two people of faith. And so inserted in there was, and I don't have the specific language right in front of me, but a man and a woman of consenting age, or two people of consenting age. So, right, you hear that? So that's been inserted into our social principle about marriage. For a while there, it said a man and a woman of consenting age and two people of consenting age. So for a while there, we had four people somehow or other in official United Methodist definition of marriage. Well, we got the and changed to an or. So, and that was seen by many as kind of a compromise, right? So it's not clean. It's not going to have nice flow to it because it's got this sort of phrase kind of awkwardly inserted in the middle of it. But that's kind of the spirit of this general conference, right? This delegate got up on the floor and said, we got to do this. A delegate from Zimbabwe, or was it Zambia? From Zambia got up and said, I'm going to have a hard time with this back home unless I get this phrase in here. And so that's the way, it's kind of a microcosm of the spirit of the whole thing. So we got regionalization, we got removal of restrictive language, and we have a totally new social principles. So that is readily available online. Please read it. It's really nice. It's really good. And it's just the product of a lot of years of work. The other kind of big topic that I think it's important to say is that this General Conference ended disaffiliations. So this General Conference reversed everything that went into effect in 2019. This General Conference reversed it, including taking out the paragraph about disaffiliations. And it was kind of the institution, the rules of our church kind of caught up to where the church already had been. I mean, we've been here for 5 years now. I feel like a lot of us in the church just said 2019 is not us. So let's live a different church. Well, this general conference kind of caught the institution up to where many of us are.
Can churches still disaffiliate?
Churches can absolutely still disaffiliate. They could have beforehand, too. There is a process by which congregations can leave the denomination. It's in there. It's not the term disaffiliation, but to leave the denomination has always been an option.
I was on the board of trustees for a long time. There's always been a way that people can leave the church if they so desire. It just became glorified, if you will, in 2019. But it's still a way churches can leave the denomination if they so desire.
It's a process of working it out with their annual conference. So before we get to some more questions and conversation, I do want to highlight just a few more things. The United Methodist Church voted to be in full communion with the Episcopal Church. The Episcopal Church has not reciprocated.
They haven't said that they want us yet.
But they will. It's all signs point to yes. So that's a big deal. Full communion with the Episcopal Church would mean a relationship like several others we have, where clergy orders are recognized and United Methodist clergy can serve in Episcopal congregations, et cetera, and vice versa. Also, sacramental authority was granted to ordained deacons.
Woo! Let's hear for the deacons. Okay.
And that's a big deal because it allows for the open table to be open even further and be present in the world in ways that deacons are called to do. And then the final thing I want to point out is a kind of a technical piece, but might be interested. The global church's budget was reduced, which impacted a lot of things, but one of the things it impacted was the number of bishops that the United States is going to have. And in particular, the number of bishops that our jurisdiction is going to have. So our jurisdiction, which is South Central jurisdiction, will be going now down to 6 bishops from where we were, which was... We're
more than 6.
We were at 9. I think we were at 9. We were planning for 7, and we ended up with 6. So our bishops have some figuring out to do to know where they're going to be. But all of that is to reflect sort of this different reality in the United Methodist Church, which is going to be a lot more local autonomy, a lot more focused on ministry and unity and inclusion and just this profound sense of hopefulness. So those are the kind of the big pieces. With any other of the big ideas?
And let me just remind everyone who's watching us right now on the live stream for Facebook, you can start putting your questions into the comment section, and we have someone who's going to be running those questions up to us. So we're transitioning to that part of the event this evening. Should I just start getting questions?
Yeah, let's see.
Let's see. Questions.
There's a lot of things.
I just want you to explain a little bit more what full communion is. I don't understand.
Right, you get some bread and you have a drink and you're not hungry afterwards.
The question is, what does a full communion relationship look like? One denomination in full communion with another denomination would, among other things, recognize the pastors of other denominations so that I, as an ordained United Methodist pastor, could serve in Episcopal Church. Could also come into an Episcopal Church and preside at communion, and it would count, you know.
Can you name the other denominations we're currently in full communion with?
God,
Come
Katie
on,
Nix.
Methodist nerd. I can tell you the Lutheran ELCA is one.
ELCA, Moravian Church. Oh, that's the AME and AME Zion and all. I don't think we're in full communion with UCC. CME. No, I can't.
All right, first person who comes up with this, Andy's going to buy him
But
lunch.
it's ELCA
There's the rule.
Moravian for sure, and Pan Methodist group. Yeah.
Other questions?
What else do you guys want to know about?
You're close.
We talked about regionalization. So is Missouri by itself a region, or are we part of, explain that a little bit and where we are in that.
We are a host unto ourselves because Missourians know this.
What has been created as far as our particular context would be a U.S. region. So the United States would be a region. And we would still have our jurisdictions, at least as of this moment, we still have our 5 jurisdictions: Northeast, Southeast, North Central, South Central, and Western. Missouri is its annual conference in the South Central jurisdiction in the U.S. region.
It's okay, all of God's creatures are welcome, just hopefully they're not in the attic right now. For those who are watching on Facebook, we've got creature. Okay, so say, well, here, hold on, let me just bring this back here. Here we go.
What was the question?
Online question. In the new regionalization structure, what parts of the Book of Discipline can be adapted and what parts have to remain the same?
Since the central regionalization is able to amend and adapt different pieces, what will our region have the authority to do?
Yes. Okay, so there's kind of 2 answers to the question. Currently, you can't adapt the social principles, you can't adapt the Constitution. There's a third thing. Articles of religion, like the things that we all agree about. Mostly it's just rules like parsonage requirements. You could adapt that because that doesn't make sense everywhere, that kind of thing. And also, I think it's helpful to know that adaptation is not just a willy-nilly like, oh, do whatever you want. There is, because we're Methodists, there's process for everything, and there is a process
And paperwork.
for adaptation and paperwork, yes. Yes. As far as what would come next, the Standing Committee is also one of our big jobs in the next 4 years, which we've been working on for 8 years already, is what we're calling a general book of discipline. So 8 years ago, 2012, I guess? I think in 2012. Okay, whatever. I think in 2012. I can't do math anymore. I think in 2012, the General Conference asked the Standing Committee to look at our Book of Discipline and decide real specifically what's adaptable, what's not adaptable. And so that is work that we're currently working on, what we're doing. So some of those things may change, but for now, for sure, not the Articles of Religion, not the Constitution, that's not the social principles, that stuff all is the same for everyone.
So I just want you to remember this. When your pastor asks you to serve on the trustee committee, it could be a whole lot worse. You could be asked to serve on that committee instead. So say yes to the smaller job at your church and thank Jill for the hard work that she does. Other questions? Pastor Erica.
I have a couple. First off, since the number of bishops is being reduced in our jurisdiction, does that mean there's going to be rezoning happening? Since our jurisdiction is being reduced from 9 bishops to 6 bishops, does that mean there's going to be some rezoning of the conferences within the jurisdiction?
No.
Okay.
Okay, clearly there are way more than 6 annual conferences in our jurisdiction. Mm-hmm. I think there are 10 annual conferences, and 6. We will end up with 6 bishops. So what we're actually going to be talking about is not rezoning or merging right now. We're going to be talking about the word coverage. So the College of Bishops, which is the group of 6 bishops plus retired bishops in our jurisdiction, decide which bishop is going to cover which other annual conference.
Okay.
So our structure is such that the Jurisdictional Episcopacy Committee, on which I sit, assigns bishops. But when we assign bishops, there's going to be 4 annual conferences that don't get an assignment. So the bishops will then decide who is covering those. In the future, will there be mergers of annual conferences? Yes, absolutely. It's already almost done in Texas because of the number of disaffiliations that they had. So there are 3 conferences in Texas that are in process of merging. But as of right now, we'll be talking about coverage.
Okay, thank you. Also, you've answered the questions here really well, but I want to hear about the feel of you being there in the conference. In the beginning, I heard that there were some delegates who were part of churches who disaffiliated and how they were slowing things down intentionally. But I didn't hear that towards the second week, toward the end. Did that quiet down?
Yes, it did.
It did quiet down.
Everything everyone kept saying was, this is a different general conference. I would encourage everyone to go watch the sermon from Bishop Eben Nihwatwa from the Zimbabwe area. In his sermon, he says, "I'm pinching myself. Is this a different general conference?" And I think there was a consensus even among people who disagreed with each other that we're all going to try to work together to try to build consensus on things. We saw that in the work in our committees and our subcommittees, and we saw it on the floor. I think there was a genuine willingness for everyone to want to work together, and so anyone who did have intentions to be disruptive or to slow down our processes, there really weren't enough of them there to really affect that kind of change. Also, we were very good at slowing down our own processes, so we didn't need any help.
We had contests at our seats as to what the vote was going to be like. And we did find that on almost every vote, we could almost predict the number of no votes it would be. So there were some folks there who I would think if we had a spy would be consistently voting against everything. But for the most part, they were right on. It started off with a pretty high, and then as things got going, then that amount began to get lower. And particularly on the main issues, though, it appeared to be a lot more, I should say a lot less no votes, if you will, than we would expect, okay? But yeah, I think that, and then there were some who, there were some scullabug that some of the delegates were actually brought from Africa and other places, if you will, to sit in on it. And I tell the story, I had a little friend from Liberia, and we were on I was on the group, local church as my legislative committee. And we talked a little bit on the way up to the meeting, and we got to talking to each other. And we got up and needed to introduce ourselves. And he got up, first thing he said, "That is my friend." I'm looking around. What's this dude talking about? He said, "He is a good man." I said, "Oh, he must be talking about me now, okay." But we became very, very close, and every time he would come past Jill, he'll hand bump us and stuff. It's a lot more congeniality, if you will, among the delegates. There were some that were still pretty bitter, some that knew that weren't exactly in favor of a lot of stuff. But for the most part, as the bishop said, when we start out, the people were there because they wanted to be there, and they wanted to see change, and that's what happened.
So, how did the room feel when the resolutions or petitions passed for full inclusion, for ordination, for marriage?
We did the love train. Literally, we stopped, and the worship leaders for the whole general conference, they were amazing. And that's where we chose to go to church that Sunday. And they were amazing. And she's one of the worship leaders started singing Aretha Franklin, How I Got Over. So she sang that in a jazzy version. It was amazing. And then they literally went into Love Train. And somebody got up and started dancing, and everybody just did the Love Train. That's exactly what happened. But I think my favorite part was David Wilson, who we elected as a bishop, who is the first Native American bishop. He said something from Great Plains. He said something that really stuck with most people. He was like, you're not making decisions for yourself. You're making decisions for 7 generations ahead of you. So if you keep that in mind, you're not talking about you. You're not talking about your local your local congregation. You're thinking 7 decades to the future. What do you want the church to look like? So for me, that just set the stage.
We have a couple online questions here. The first is, in some written explanations of the conference decisions that I have read, it has been implied that some of the inclusion elements would be considered optional for individual churches dependent on the congregational wishes. Is this indeed the case?
So it's important to say that the actions of this general conference simply removed language. So where a same-sex wedding was prevented in a congregation, we just took that out. So nothing was added to say you have to do one. We just took out the stuff that said you couldn't. That applies to pastors and to congregations. So in a sense, the answer is yes to that, because it was removal of language, not addition.
Thank you. The next online question. It sounds like there was significant consensus on important changes. Were there any areas where hoped-for movement did not happen yet, or where there was some noticeable disagreement?
I don't want anyone to think that everyone was in lockstep all the time. When we talk about the spirit of hopefulness and collegiality and collaboration, it is while we are disagreeing with each other that we have this sense of collegiality and collaboration. And that's especially true in the committees. You know, there's big headlines that happen on the big floor, but when you get down into a committee and then you break that committee down into subcommittees of sometimes a dozen people, and you're sitting around a circle talking about, with translators sitting behind, and you're talking about like some particular petition that says, should deacons get sacramental authority or whatever it is. And that's when you have this engagement with people who see things differently than you. And that's where the Spirit was really, really present. So I don't want anyone to think that it was just everyone agreed about everything. It was within our disagreement that we found that sense of grace. The second piece of that, and there's a third piece coming as well. The second piece of that is I don't want anyone to think that United Methodist Church in Africa is one big thing. Africa is not a monolith in the United Methodist Church. So if you hear somebody say, well, the African delegates think da-da-da-da-da-da, they know. I mean, it's like, no. One of our most intense disagreement points was about the number of bishops in Africa. And we spent hours talking about that. And I don't think there was I don't know if anybody from the U.S. participated in that conversation at all. And so we are not a monolith. We don't agree about everything, and yet we found this grace. There are some issues that came our way, and I wrote down 2 in preparation for this. If there's others, help me. But one of the significant issues that didn't get fully processed through was the issue around divestment of our funds from particular places. So there's a big push to divest our investments from companies that are part of
Fossil fuels.
fossil fuel production, for example. And that happens all the time, but there was a big push this year. And there was a second one to divest from countries that are engaged in prolonged military action, which would make it hard to invest in the United States. So I'm just going to say that. But that was geared toward Israel, of course. That was the thought was Israel. And those were both intense conversations that we simply ran out of time to have on the floor. So divestment is a big one that we didn't get to. Another one that we didn't get to that a lot of people wanted to talk about was the role of the licensed local pastor in the United Methodist Church. And this year there was kind of an effort, as there is every 4 year, to talk about the voting rights of licensed local pastors in the United Methodist Church and whether they can serve. Currently, they can only vote on particular things at the annual
Andy,
conference.
what is a licensed local pastor? For those of us who aren't seventh generation Methodist.
Thank you for that, Katie. A license, so there's a number of categories for clergy. Ivan has already mentioned he's a pastor, but he's a lay person.
And he's our favorite. Please put that
Ivan
in there.
is just his own category.
Yeah.
There's these categories, and then there's Ivan.
Yeah.
So ordained clergy are ordained deacon and ordained elder, two different orders of ordained clergy, and also serving in many, many churches are licensed local pastors. And rather than being ordained, they are licensed. It's a different educational requirement. They have some different authorities granted to them. Most significantly, I think, is that an ordained clergy person carries that authority with them wherever they go. As an ordained elder, I'm an ordained elder anywhere I happen to be. A licensed local pastor carries their pastoral authority only in their own particular appointment. That seems to be the most significant distinction.
We are at 728.
Yes, we are. So there was a push to talk about licensed local pastors' participation in the church that we didn't get to as well. So those are the two, divestment and licensed local pastor questions linger from this general conference.
Do licensed local pastors have vote and voice?
On some things, yes, and on other things, no.
Okay, I'm going to give this to you.
Issues of license. Well, okay. After that, it becomes 729. Okay. I think on that issue of that is an issue also that is different in some of the other countries as to how they call different people. And that's one of the things that could possibly go into that discipline for the particular region that's coming to be. So I think that those are the kind of things that are different, and they were trying to abide by what we were doing, and it made it difficult in many cases. Now,
Since you did such a great job, I am sure there are many more questions, and the great thing is I can lock the doors and leave them here, and you can attack them afterwards. There are also going to be general conference debriefings in Kansas City and around the state, and the bishop, of course, will be talking about ours at annual conference this year as well. But I think, since Ivan is his own category, if we are all comfortable, I was going to have him close in prayer, and then we are going to close by singing number 368, My Hope is Built on Nothing Less. Right? So you're all getting your hymnals, but you're going to have to do it with your eyes closed because Ivan's about to pray.
it's awful difficult to understand why I take so much abuse from people, but I'm so sorry about that. But let us just relax, take some deep breaths, and just think about all the things that have happened to us today and all the things that God has done, and we thank for what He's done. Let us pray. Dear Father God, we thank you for this day, and we thank you for all that you have done for us and what you're doing for us right now. and more importantly, what you're going to do for us in the future. We ask your blessing and thankfulness for these folks who gave their time for the last 5 years plus to do the work of your church as a delegate to the General Conference. And I would venture to say that they have done a good job. You can tell them, well done, O good and faithful servant. Continue to look after this congregation, all the congregations here. Let us not just look at the writing on the wall and what's on a piece of paper, but let us learn how to walk the talk that we say we are as Christians. We thank Katie and her congregation for opening this forum up. But just let us understand, as long as we keep God in the center of our lives, then we have an opportunity to be special, very special. We ask these things in your Son, Jesus' name. Amen.
Let's stand together, beloved. Number 368 for those who don't have it memorized. It feels weird not to give a benediction. So, beloved, go and know that our ground is sure under our feet, even if we don't know what the next few steps will look like. May your soul be encouraged and your heart prepared to go out and love in the way that you best do that in this world and community. Go do the good work, and God will take care of the rest. And all God's people said, Amen.